7 questions in a session, chopped it up with Chris Caddy.
My name's Robert Penner.
I'm Casey. We're with the Tenants Union, and you're watching 7 questions with the session.
All right, let's try that again.
All right, one more time.
Actually, that's dope.
Probably adds to the general vibe.
7 questions in a session.
Yo, this your woke caddy Chris, man. You are now watching 7 questions in the session. Today I got the Milwaukee Autonomy Tenants Union up in here. We got a dope interview coming. First thing first, go follow the sponsors. Billionaire Hemp Wraps, treat your lungs better. Spray 420, best cardio deodorizer out here. And 8 off the bone men's and female oils. Come get you some so you get you some. Man, appreciate y'all for coming on the show.
Yeah, for
Thanks,
sure.
Man. Appreciate you having us.
Man, so I came across y'all page and I seen kind of the work you guys was doing, and I was like, man, this is dope. So I'm like, I got to get y'all on the show. That's why I reached out.
Hell yeah.
Man, so I want y'all to kind of explain like the name and kind of explain like what you guys do in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're the Milwaukee Autonomous Tenants Union because we are partially because we're affiliated with the Autonomous Tenants Union Network across the country. So we're part of a tenants union network across the country that's dedicated to fighting for fair housing for all through getting safe, comfortable, affordable housing for everybody, and ultimately ending rent. So we want tenants to be able to come together as tenants, as renters, to leverage their power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would add on to that tenants have a shared interest in everything that Casey just mentioned of dignified, safe, affordable housing. And there are more renters than there are landlords, right? There are more people that are tenants than there are owners of the properties. And when we think about it critically, we don't need landlords because landlords don't provide housing. That's one of the myths that we try to undermine with our work, is that the landlord provides housing. Well, that's not true. The plumbers, the concrete layers, the electricians, the drywall people, the roofers, those are the people that provide housing, the people that build it, that bring it into existence. We like to think of the landlord rather as a gatekeeper to housing, because after it's built, the landlord acquires it and then holds it and says, if you're going to live here, you must pay me. Don't ask about maintenance. Don't ask about any kind of leniency or anything like that. I'm not going to do that. All I need you to do is pay me money, or I will have the state authorities come and remove you.
Come put you out. And I see that a lot with people, they showing up with the sheriffs and just putting people out on the streets. Especially because I run a moving company. Mm-hmm. So I deal with it a lot, like people needing last minute moves if they can get their stuff before Eagle shows up.
Right.
Yeah.
So like I know how that be, man. Like, but how did y'all get into this line of work?
Yeah, I've been with the tenants union since it started in 2020. Obviously, there was a huge need in 2020 for that kind of housing assistance, for housing advocacy work. And I was evicted in 2018. That's kind of how I got interested in this, is I went through that process not knowing what to do, not knowing how to deal with it, not knowing what my rights were, and was just kind of summarily removed without a court order from my home because I didn't know what my rights were. And so from that point on, I became very passionate about making sure that doesn't happen to other people, that in fact, the whole basis for a system of exploitation and inequality, like the rental housing system, maybe we can eliminate that someday. Maybe we can come up with something better that puts the people that live in the housing first, that gives them agency rather than giving all of the power to the courts and to the landlords. So that's, and this is, this isn't my work. This isn't my job. This is something that I spend my independent time on, that it's a volunteer almost type of deal to run this union. So we don't get paid at all. We've got no money. We've got no funds. We've got nothing like that. This is all straight from the grassroots.
From the heart.
Right from the heart. Yeah, exactly.
That's dope, man. Like that y'all actually take y'all time to fight for people who actually need the help. That's dope as hell.
Well, and I'd say, like, yeah, we're fighting for people, but also, like, I rent, and my rent's too high. Like, I'm going to have to move when my lease is up so I have a cheaper place. Like, we're not just fighting for other people. It's also that we're concerned about ourselves and that we understand that ourselves is part of the tenant class and as part of the renter class and not as separate from the people we're working with.
Like, what's some of the things, like, do people contact y'all?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What's some of the things you guys deal with on a daily basis, man?
Oh, I mean, it's really an amalgamation of everything that possibly could go wrong when you're renting, when you're a tenant. We get contacted about. We get contacted about evictions. That's probably the top one. People, they've received a 5-day notice or a 14-day notice or a 30-day notice, and they don't know what to do. They feel like they're helpless. They feel like they don't know which direction to go in. What their best use of their, whatever power or money that they have is. Oh, do I just leave after 5 days, or do I go to court, or what do I do? Because this isn't like really something that we teach people about in school or nothing. It is information that's kind of mystified in a way. And so evictions is a big one. Security deposits a lot. We do a lot of work trying to get people back their security deposits that were taken wrongfully, because landlords do feel like, oh, well, I've got this money, why should I have to give it back? And so they find these little ticky-tacky reasons, or just make things up to say, oh, well, I'm going to keep your full security deposit for damages. And that happens so much. And then it is also it's maintenance.
Yeah.
It is the maintenance of properties that is not being done. And many landlords in the city are guilty of this.
I feel like
beyond maintenance, like just basic livability, like the ability to have water in your apartment, electricity, all these things that
not have
you're paying for
bed
it.
Bugs, all over
dude,
the
that
place.
shit is crazy.
Yeah.
I just seeing some of the conditions of these buildings I go into and move people out of, and I'll be like, how are these people even landlords? Like, how? Like, you ain't did nothing, and this time you own this building, you ain't, like, that be wild to me.
Yeah.
And there's no this is one of the big problems, is there's no oversight for landlords. You don't have to be any kind of special anybody to be a landlord. Money. All you have to do is own a building, and that's it. There's no registration process. There's no mandatory training. There's nothing. And there's also, like I said, there's no oversight. Who's supposed to oversee if landlords are doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? Is it the courts? Well, no, the courts doesn't really do that. And most people can't go to court because they can't pay for a lawyer. They might not even be able to pay the filing fee, which is a couple $100. So, okay, so it's not the courts. Well, is it the police? No, the police don't do that. Like, they'll mostly take the side of the landlord
every time.
Okay. Well, maybe it's the city, the Department of Neighborhood Services. Maybe they're supposed to enforce the law, but they say no. We don't really have the funding. We don't have the capacity for that. We can only enforce the law when it is brought to our attention. We don't go out and do inspections unless somebody tells us that the conditions are bad. And even then, I mean, let's be real about it. The Department of Neighborhood Services is corrupt as hell.
Wow.
And then, some people would say then, oh, well, you need to vote then for this mayor or this person or whatever. But we see that no matter who's in office, we've been doing this work for a long time, since 2020 from Bobby's case, we see that doesn't really change anything. Like, those people are not responsive to the needs of tenants. And in fact, a lot of them take money from landlords, right? Or are landlords themselves. So there's really, what does that leave people? Really just the solidarity we have with each other, again, as like a tenant class or a renter class.
Yo, this your Woke Caddy Chris, man. This is a quick break from this session brought to you by Holy Trinity Financial. Now, if y'all watch this show enough, y'all know I'm always preaching financial literacy, and it ain't never too late to get your credit together, and now is the time. So Holy Trinity is offering a once-in-a-lifetime chance for people just like you who tired of the scammers, who tired of paying all this money to the credit repair people and not getting no results. They offering a package just for y'all. All y'all gotta do is call this number below or hit the website. Tell them Caddy Chris told you to call. You will get 50% off your first month of credit repair service on behalf of your wealth. So, man, like I said, Holy Trinity Financials. I would never post or promote anything on my show that I didn't believe in. This is not just a paid ad. This is a actual customer talking to y'all. I was one of their first clients and they got my credit exactly where it needs to be. So again, call this number below, hit the website, tell Holy Trinity Financial that Caddy Chris told y'all to call and get 50% off y'all first month of credit repair service on your wall. And back to this interview, man. Is it like is it rules for people that they can follow when evictions happen? Like, is it a certain steps they're supposed to take when they get those notices?
Yeah, I mean, you always want to have your day in court. That's a major part of this, is that some people receive a 5-day notice and they think, oh, I got to be out in 5 days. But that's not how it works. You have 5 days before the landlord can file an eviction with the court. They have to provide you notice first, give you 5 days to pay up or do whatever the notice says that you're in violation of. And then once you get past that 5 days, then an eviction can be filed with the court, and then a court date will be assigned to you. Always go for your court date. And there are also legal mechanisms in the city of Milwaukee. Legal Action of Wisconsin is one of them, where if you're low income, they can provide you with a free lawyer, free representation. Eviction Free MKE is another service like that provides people with free lawyers when they're facing eviction. So make sure you get a lawyer as soon as you get that 5-day notice, or at least apply for one, and make sure to go to court, because 80+% of people that get eviction, they never show up for their court date.
They just move, right?
Right, they just move, or they wait for they don't show up at the court date, and they just wait for the sheriff to show up. Because you go to court, and if the judge rules in the favor of the landlord, says yes, this is a legitimate eviction, then what's called a writ of restitution is filed with the sheriff's office, and that is what allows the sheriff to come and remove you. The landlord cannot remove you. Right, that's illegal. That's extremely illegal for the landlord to remove you. It must be the sheriff, and there must be a writ.
So if anybody out there that hears that and been removed by the landlord, that is against the will, against the law. Mm-hmm. So you definitely could see something about that.
Yeah. And before you get to that point, before you even receive an eviction notice, just document everything. Any interaction with your landlord, anytime you pay rent, anything, because they do lie. And Definitely. So by the time you get to court, you want to have receipts and be able to say, nope, I called them on this day, they said this. I emailed them on this day, they said this. So that when you get to court, it's not all of a sudden whatever story is being told.
Right. What so often happens is that you'll pay rent to the landlord and they won't provide you a receipt as they're required to do. And then the landlord will put an eviction on you and say they didn't pay. And take you to court and evict you and keep your security deposit, because the landlord is purposefully not keeping records. And if you can't go to court and show the receipts, and the landlord can come in and show the ledger that he has and say, oh, they didn't pay, even though you did, the court's going to go with the landlord.
That's why I require paying online too a lot if you can, because you automatically get a receipt.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
You save those every time. Screenshot those every time.
Save all of that.
What do you guys think the city should do about some of these slumlords? What's y'all honest opinion?
I mean, part of what we're fighting for, right, is for there not to be more rent, for housing to be decommodified. And so really what that looks like is, do we need the landlord class to provide housing? Because back to what Bobby was saying, like, do we really think they provide housing? Our answer is no. So our answer would be, really, let's talk about what does it look like for people to own their own housing collectively, or just straight out own it, whatever that ends up looking like. But we don't need people like Berrada or some of these other big slumlords to just keep buying up building after building after building, and there's no... He just doesn't need to be a landlord anymore.
At all.
That can be, however, that needs to be taken from him so that people have control over their housing.
Yeah, I mean, the way I would frame it in terms of the city is impotent, and there really isn't any kind of outlook where we can see the city actually taking any action, because the landlords pay a lot of campaign contributions, and there's one political machine that runs the city and holds power in the city, right? You've got the Chevy Johnson Democratic Party political machine that has vast control over the mechanisms of power. And so we say, okay, well, is there any prospect for the city in the present to change its ways? And we say no. There really isn't. Like, we can use the city as a tool, some of these complaint processes as a tool, but really the changes aren't going to happen at the city level. They're going to happen at the community level, at the neighborhood level, at the building level. That's where the change has to come from. And I think this kind of idea where we put the city institution on a pedestal and say, well, do something for us. Well, it's just not set up that way. We have to, in fact, start doing for ourselves and doing for ourselves, not on the basis of our affiliation with the city, but on our interests, our mutual interest as working class people, as renters, and as poor people in a post-industrial, Milwaukee.
Yeah, and I would have people look to like labor unions, right? Like for labor unions, they weren't necessarily looking to a city or a state or a federal government to put in safety regulations or raise pay or give them weekends or, different labor fights. They unionized and did it themselves. And so kind of like Bobby was saying, we're not really looking necessarily to the city as much as we're looking to our collective power.
Man, obviously money, of course, but like, how do somebody like Berrada come about buying all these properties?
Oh, we could tell you about Berrada. Berrada's little personal history. He's from a pretty wealthy real estate family in Morocco, North Africa. He came here for college. To
Milwaukee?
To Milwaukee, yeah.
Okay.
And in the early mid 2000s, he bought up an apartment building, and then he bought another, and then he bought another, and now he owns nearly 1,000 buildings across the city of Milwaukee. So it was something where he started out with some wealth and some background in real estate, and was able to leverage that into building Milwaukee's largest real estate empire. And the methods that he uses are exploitation. He exploits people, right? He exploits people for their wages, essentially, because what you do, any given person that runs from Berrada, you go to work and you create value with your labor. That's what you do at work. You've created value. And then part of the social necessary part of your existence is to have a place to live, right? You need to go back and rest and have a place where you can cook food, prepare your lunch, have a family, relax, do all that stuff. And Berrada sees that need, right? That landlords in general see that need, and they say, okay, if we bring these types of buildings, these types of homes under our ownership, then we can take a part of the value that is created by people and that is given to them in wages, right? You come home with your wages. If we own the housing, then we can extract part of that from you. And Berrada is really good at extracting. And some of these other big landlords, they're really good at extracting. That's what they do. They just extract.
Take every dollar you got.
Yeah, exactly.
And I see a lot of people going through some of these situations that we was just talking about, like with Berrada the most. Like, if you ride around the city, you kind of see like a lot of obviously he owns a lot of it, but it's crazy how you can see all these people are dealing with the same situations at all these buildings. It's like, what can we do about some shit like that? That's crazy to me. Like, that's even allowed. And I don't want to say I had some dealings with him, but again, I be in a lot of his buildings doing my work, and I get to see it for myself. Like how is people even able to live in these circumstances, basically? Like,
well, and that gets back to the idea of like, do landlords provide housing? Like, what do we consider housing? If you have a bare bones apartment with no running water, the electricity may or may not work, it's full of rats and roaches, like, is that a roof over your head? I guess. But like, do we really consider that to be providing housing? Yeah. I would say no.
Providing 4 walls, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
sometimes the ceiling be open.
Right, water come. I mean, we were, we've had a lot of dealings with Berrada. Obviously, we were sued by Berrada, the tenants union, and 3 of us. We just had that lawsuit against us dismissed. There was an article about it, Wisconsin Examiner. But Berrada's come at us hard, because we've been hypercritical of him, because he's kind of the representation, the epitome of what it means to be a slumlord in the city of Milwaukee. He sets the paradigm, and other landlords follow him.
What was the basis on his lawsuit? What was against y'all?
He said we defamed him. Right. He said that we made defamatory statements about him. There was the first thing is there was a fire at one of his buildings in 2022 where the life of a child was taken. And we did some work with the mother of that child, and we made statements about, how frequent neglected rental properties in Milwaukee catch on fire from electrical neglect and malfunctions and things like that. We didn't say directly Berrada caused the fire because we don't know that. The fire report was inconclusive. There was evidence that it may have been electrical fire. There were evidence to the contrary as well. So we didn't say anything about, yes, Berrada is at fault of the fire, but we said, look, there's trends here, there's patterns that we can look at, and he took that as a direct defamation attack. The other thing that he sued us over was we pointed out that a new employee of his who's making six figures, a guy named Archie Blunt, was actually...
They had him on the news recently, right? Yeah.
But what we don't know, what's not told about him is that for 15 years, he was working at the Department of Neighborhood Services for the city as the special inspections guy for Berrada properties. He was in charge of making sure that they followed the law. And then after 15 years, he gets his pension from the city, and he takes a big fat salary for working for Berrada. And we said, this looks like a conflict of interest. And he said, that's defamation.
It definitely
And we're saying, look, we're just calling it how we see it. And we weren't the only ones that said this looks sketchy.
When I seen it on the news, I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
You've been working for the state or the city this whole time, and now you're working with him.
Now you're working for Berrada. When in fact, it's probably working for Berrada all along.
And it's crazy that you say like that. Y'all defaming his name, I guess. And you can go online and see all the stories with people saying what they have against living those buildings. So
yeah, and that's what our lawyer William Salton said. Is basically he's like, how can they have damaged your reputation if your reputation was shit to begin with?
Yeah.
There's no reputation to damage. He's already one of the lowest people in the city in terms of what people think of him. So I think it was his ego, his pride that drove that lawsuit. And I mean, he spent tens of thousands of dollars hiring lawyers and doing all sorts of stuff to try and get us. But really, we came out of that much stronger than we went in. It's given us a sense of credibility in a way for people that, Berrada came after us and he had to back down.
I would assume that makes people flock your way even more.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the other thing is when you are talking to people, they want to know you're actually about it, right? And we fought him in court and won. I mean, what else is there to say, right?
Chris, man, this is a quick break from this interview to let y'all know to please subscribe, like the channel, man. Tell your people to follow, tell your girl to follow, tell your mans to follow, man. Get us some subscribers, get us some followers, share an interview. Yeah, right here. You see it, 7 questions in a session. Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. You can follow my personal page at Caddy CEO_Chris. Follow the channel. 7 questions in a session. Back to this interview. Okay, so what are some of your goals with this? Like, what's some of the things you want to accomplish in the next couple of years?
Go ahead.
I'll talk about our strategy, kind of, and kind of what we're doing right now and how we see that advancing in the future. So we use a strategy that centers around tenants councils. Right, so we're the citywide tenants union, the Milwaukee Autonomous Tenants Union, and then what we do is we encourage tenants in buildings who are not satisfied with their living situation, who are facing repression, who are facing retaliation, who just feel that they're not getting what they're paying for. We encourage them to come together collectively and form a tenant council. And a tenant council is a formation that's protected under state law, under ATCP Administrative Code 134.07. I got that shit memorized because I've had to say it so much. And this is what protects tenant councils and tenants unions from retaliation. It recognizes them as a legitimate form of tenants organizing to express their rights, to express their agency. And so we represent tenants councils in several buildings right now. particularly Berrada buildings, but in other places as well. And we try to make sure we put pressure on these landlords with a variety of tactics to get conditions changed, to stop evictions, to get security deposits back, to just bring the structural conditions up to a minimum standard of safety and dignity, right? And what we see is that we hope that we can expand these councils to many buildings across the area rather than just a few. We're working in a particular area of the city right now, and we want to build up kind of tenant power in that area as kind of a model, and then we want to move on and bring these tenant council formations to the rest of the city. And the more tenants union members there are, the more councils there are that are actively fighting for their rights for safe housing, the more powerful the tenants movement's going to become.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, those are my goals, is to see us spread out of the neighborhood we're in now and kind of pop up all over the city. I think, obviously, we're in a lot of Berrada buildings, and we've been talking about him a lot today, but we should be clear that he's not the only problem in the city. There's plenty of landlords who might be smaller but are just as terrible, right? Who are still slumlords. So we want to be able to reach people in all those buildings, and we want to be able to reach people who are in all parts of Milwaukee, so that we don't see people living the way that they're being forced to live by these just awful slumlords.
Spending y'all hard-earned money to get nothing in return but four walls. It's time for Milwaukee to change that.
Yeah.
Obviously is an election coming up in about a month now. Are there any candidates running that kind of promote what you guys are promoting?
Well, I mean, we don't really do much in terms of endorsements. Like, that's kind of the autonomous part, is we don't want to be connected really to politicians or to the election cycle, because so much is already dependent on the election cycle that oscillates around the election cycle. So we want to be able to separate ourselves from that. But there are definitely, people out there in terms of the political scene in Milwaukee that are pro-tenant. And don't believe that landlords should have a blank check to be able to exploit people and deprive them of housing just systematically. A couple guys that we work with real closely are Ryan Clancy. He's a state representative, but he was for a long time county supervisor here. Juan Miguel Martinez is another guy that we've worked with. He's a county supervisor down on the south side. And there's a guy running for another county supervisor seat named Ron Jansen, who's definitely done some good stuff and expressed support for the tenants union. Unfortunately, there's really not anybody in the Common Council that is pro tenant, right? Most of those guys are pro landlord, or they are landlords themselves, or they take money from landlords to fund their campaigns. And so we don't really have any friends down at City Hall.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're thinking about who you want to vote for, I would just ask yourself, like, how much better is your life now than it was from the last person who was, at the city level, the county level, state, federal, whatever elections coming up? Has your rent gone down? Mine went up.
Have the landlords changed their ways?
Yeah.
Have they stopped magically extracting people's wealth, people's hard-earned income, and putting it towards their own enrichment? No, I mean, the elections don't stop any of that, and it's unfortunate, right? Because we'd love to see elections that are doing something for people, electoral processes that mean something, that don't just result in the same people over and over and over again, in the same systems being perpetuated through time, right? And everybody's tired of that.
Yeah.
That's why we see such low voter turnout in Milwaukee. It's not because people are uneducated. It's because people know that it doesn't make much of a difference really at the end of the day, and that some of the electoral outcomes are decided before anybody's even cast a vote. Like for the mayoral election, we know who's going to win. It's like, and it's like, why even turn out when you already know who's going to win?
Yeah.
So we see low electoral turnout, and we see alienation from the election system as a whole. And we got to, take some things from that and say, okay, well then this is a flawed democracy. This is a flawed process. What can we do to repair it, to make it better, or to create something new?
All right. Well, last question I want to ask you guys You said you was from Atlanta. You said you was from Madison.
Mm-hmm.
What does Milwaukee mean to y'all?
And Milwaukee is home for me. Milwaukee means a lot because, I came from Madison. I grew up there, but like as soon as I was an adult, I came down to Milwaukee. As soon as I turned 18, I came here, and I've been going to school, and really just getting to know the city. I've been everywhere in the city. At this point, I know it like the back of my hand.
For real.
And I mean, hell, I love Milwaukee. Like it's imperfect. It's full of imperfect things and imperfect people, but like you got to be passionate about where you are. And like, I don't know, shoot, I just love it. Like I love Milwaukee so much, and I don't want to see people getting taken advantage of this way, because the people here are good people. Everywhere you go, there's good people that are ready to help you out, show you some kindness, show you some love. And it's really hard to see good people with families, people that are doing their best to try and make it out here. Honest, hardworking, dignified, working class people to get exploited the way they are and have no hope for the future. Oh my gosh, living day to day. It's so hard to see that. It's hard to see people I know going through that. And like I've just kind of resolved to spend my time and the power that I have to, try and give Milwaukee some kind of future that isn't, what we have right now.
Yeah, and I mean, from my perspective, I agree with everything Bobby said. And also, like, big part of the reason I moved up here is that I couldn't afford to keep living in Atlanta with the jobs I had and the rent that was happening there, because the gentrification and the landlording has gotten so damn bad. Like, it was just not really a great option. And so I moved up here, and things are bad here with gentrification. You can definitely see it, especially in certain parts of the city, and the rents are definitely too high. But it's not quite as bad as Atlanta yet. And I think we have a real, the yet is really key, right? Like, we have a real chance to keep this. And Bobby's right. There's a lot of people struggling. I'm not trying to say that's not happening. But we have a real chance, right, to not let Milwaukee get as bad as some of these other cities like New York, LA, Chicago, Atlanta, these big cities you hear about that are really struggling. We have a chance to not let that happen, and more than that, to turn things around, and really make this a city where people don't have to leave. People don't have to leave the city. They don't have to leave their homes. They don't have to leave anything. They can build lives for themselves no matter what, whether they, no matter how much money their family had or whatever circumstance. And that's really important. I mean, when we think about a place, I want to stay here. I don't want to get driven out by high rents again. And I'm sure, all of us want to stay here. So it's up to us to make sure that we can, to make sure that ourselves and our neighbors and all the other renters in the city can stay.
Well, I'm glad we had this conversation. Obviously, it was a little over my pay grade, but again, when I seen the content you guys were creating, when I seen the page, something sparked in me. I was like, I gotta try to get him on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I appreciate y'all coming on here. But this is the part of the interview where I say the camera on y'all. Let people know how they can contact y'all. Let people know the social medias. The camera on y'all.
So one thing you can do is Google us. You can Google Milwaukee Autonomous Tenants Union and immediately find our website, Facebook, and Instagram. And you can DM us on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. And then Bobby has our phone number and everything.
Yeah, you can reach us via email. That's the preferred method. Outreach at matunion.org. You can call us 414-410-9714. And I mean, we want to talk to you. Like, if you're having landlord problems, we want to talk to you, because we have methods and we have ways that we can facilitate your empowerment as a tenant. If you don't feel like you're getting what you're paying for when you go and turn in your rent on the first of every month, or if you're having, trouble keeping up with rent because the landlord's raising it up, it's time to do something about it. Because I know there is a feeling that, oh, well, this place is bad, but maybe if I pick up and move to another place, it'll be better there. But it is really difficult to make that kind of upward move in the rental housing market in Milwaukee. More likely than not, you're going to be moving out of slum conditions in one place and into slum conditions in another place.
Somebody else was running from.
Right. So why not take your destiny into your own hands and say, you know what? instead of just trying to move on and find something else, this is going to be my home. This is going to be my place, and I'm going to fight for it to be the way that I want it to be. And if you're willing to fight, we're willing to fight with you. We were in a little dust up yesterday with one of Berrada's henchmen, who we were about to hang a big banner up on one of his buildings, Slumlords Out of the West Side. And he had previously taken it down, but we stole it back. And we were going to hang it up again, and he came in and confronted us. And, we faced him right on. We're not scared of them. We are, if the landlord is going to come at you, call the union, because we're not scared of them. We're not scared of them. We'll face them down, in face-to-face interactions. We'll face them down in court, because they don't have the moral high ground here. They're making people live in terrible conditions and exploiting people. So if you want to fight, call the union. We're going to fight with you.
Thank y'all for watching 7 Questions in a Session. I'm your Woke Caddy Chris. Again, go follow the sponsors: Billionaire Hemp Wraps, treat your lungs better; Spray 420, best cardio deodorizer out here; and 8 Off the Bone men's and female oils. Subscribe to the channel. Help me turn this hobby into a hustle. See y'all next time. Again, appreciate y'all for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Really appreciate it. Chris, want to give you a card and a sticker?
Yep, it's going on the desk.
And welcome to the Tenants Union, man.
Appreciate it, man. I'm going to put these up here. It's going to be a part of the show forever now.
There we go.
All right.
I'm going to make sure I put it right where they can see it. When I first started this season, this table was empty.
Nice.
Here we go.
I got all these other people products and
Strength
people
of the
who come
podcast,
by.
man.
Yeah,
The strength of the podcast.
all right. Again, man, subscribe to the channel, man. We out of here.